Hello everybody, welcome back to The Breakdown. I'm Tone. It's fantastic to have you watching yet another one of my videos. Thank you very much for being here. Now the other day we had quite a long conversation about COVID-19 and the implications on the economy, the implications that that come to affect individual people, small businesses, and how we can, I guess, guard ourselves against the attack that has been in play well before this COVID-19 pandemic, or whatever you want to call it, has taken over the entire world. I want to expand on something and discuss some economic stuff that you're not going to hear in mainstream media, and you may not be aware of. Now, with my delivery essential service that I provide, I've been able to see some things, and I haven't seen any real commentary on this yet from anyone, even the people that I follow here on YouTube. So I think this is probably a good thing to cover. Now, some relations by marriage of mine have made some comments about the cost of materials. Timber is a big one. Steel is another big one. Those sorts of things for construction, and the price hikes in those items. Now, if we want to look at it in a very simple way and say, okay, right, so last year, all the economies slowed right down, okay? People were in quarantine or they were locked down and they weren't able to do anything. Only essential services were active. Then you would think that, okay, maybe there was less product produced. Mines slowed down, perhaps. But also, you would naturally deduce that there was a lot less construction. There was a lot less material being used because people weren't doing anything with that because, of course, they were locked down. They were unable to do those jobs. Now, that would be the logical response to what we've been told about what was happening last year and early this year. Well, that'd be wrong. You'd be wrong if that's what you deduced from the information you've been given. During the entirety of the lockdown last year, here in Melbourne in particular, but again, around the world as well, construction ramped up. It didn't slow down, it actually ramped up. Now, there was some slowing in mining a little bit, but again, that didn't completely stop. But there was a massive ramp up in construction works. Houses going up left, right, and centre. Now, of course, we were supposed to be in lockdown, weren't we? We weren't supposed to be mingling with people, but no, construction sites, housing construction sites in particular, are allowed to keep going. Were allowed to keep going. So, the ramp up in construction and no real change, or maybe a slight reduction in the amount of materials being sourced, has obviously caused a supply squeeze. In timber, that's a massive one. There's a huge waiting time now on timber, and they're talking about housing construction being put back now on on the timelines because of a lack of timber, a lack of steel. But they don't tell you is that during the time when we were supposed to be doing nothing, the materials were being used. at a much larger rate than previously. And part of that, I think, is what might have got us through in our economy, like the economy was able to rebound. Remember, our economy here in Australia especially is backed by the property market. So as long as the property market keeps going forward, then, you know, the overall economy has got some sort of support. See, the housing debt bubble, which has increased a lot just in the last 12 to 18 months, that's what's propping up everything. That's what's underpinning a lot of our economy here. Could be the same in Europe, and could be the same in America. But here in Australia, most definitely that's the case. But going back to what I was talking about in my previous video, if we've got an increase in supply in housing during a time when we haven't been told there is an increase of supply, we've got a decreased number of people that are able to be here from overseas right now, and certainly a decreased number of people that are allowed to come here from overseas at this current time. And we've got an increased supply of housing. That's going to affect, and we're going to see the effects of that in terms of house prices. And we already discussed that in the previous video, what that would look like in terms of debt bubble and overall economy. So I just wanted to, draw your attention to the fact that while perhaps the majority of people believed and were following the lockdown rules and were staying at home, construction work did not stop. Didn't stop. And it increased. I dare say, I can't verify this, but I dare say there were some people that were going to work in those construction jobs that may have had some form of qualification or just a general labourer's job perhaps, so that they could have some work. So that underpinned the employment numbers. I know they fudge the employment numbers anyway. They don't give us the true numbers. They never would. But I reckon there might have been a number of people that went into construction jobs, or at least labourer jobs linked to construction during that time. Just because, how else would they have the numbers of people to be able to do the construction that was happening? Those brand new houses around Melbourne, I haven't looked at the exact numbers, but it must be pretty crazy because it didn't stop. Absolutely just flat out. So we've got to really understand that while we're being told one thing, other things are going on behind our backs. If your job, let's just be clear here, if your job in retail was potentially jeopardized by this COVID-19 outbreaks and everything like that, and so therefore you have to stop your work and you have to close your shops and you have to stay at home and you have to rely on government payments and all those sorts of things, and yet now that construction didn't stop, if anything it went up in the number of places being built and people being employed there, and those people were going to and from work, those people were going to take away cafes, while the majority of the population were staying at home. Again, I'm talking about Melbourne here because Melbourne was the one that went into this massive lockdown. So we went into a national economic slowdown, obviously, I realise that. But even in all the other states, the numbers of construction went up, right? That's something that really ticks me off. I'm not in retail, I only picked up the delivery stuff late last year. But for all those people that were out of work and were told that they must rely on government stimulus payments and all, or support payments and everything like that, while just turning a blind eye to construction sites. Now, I know that was talked about in the media. There was some news articles, and they were talking about it on the television, and they were talking about it on the radio, but it was mostly palmed off. It was mostly just sort of fobbed off, never really looked in depth. But most certainly, if you wanted to go out and buy a new house, there were plenty on the market. And construction, as far as I can see, hasn't slowed down. Close to where I live, they've been pulling down old houses, renovations as well. So they pulled down old houses and they've built these new units on the blocks just over from where I live. Completely changed the look of the street, just right where we are. But renovations, like people that owned homes that are now empty because tenants, it's more difficult to get tenants into your properties because a large number of people that probably were filling those or would have been filling those now vacant homes had to leave the country or chose to leave the country at the start of this COVID stuff. So then people were out of work. They had a investment property. They didn't have tenants in it, so they were renovating their homes. Excuse me. So, I just wanted to share that because there is a reason why prices in some of the consumables has gone sky high. I don't believe that it'll continue because there will be a slowdown. If you have a great increase in the number of properties that are being built in a period of time compared to what was previous, there'll have to be a slowdown because supply and demand will be affected too drastically. Again, the government doesn't want that. The government doesn't want an oversupply in housing. The housing prices start to go down. The pressure on the banks and people that borrowed all of that brand new debt money, it starts to weigh on that, and that being one of the things that underpins the economy here in Australia, that would put great pressure on Australia. It would have implications for the Aussie dollar. So, which isn't performing real well compared to the beginning of this year. So look, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Were you aware, or did you have some sort of thoughts about construction? Did you witness this construction continuing to happen around where you are? And were you asking yourself the same question? Why is that allowed to happen, but I can't do what I normally do? Remember, a lot of the rules we've been told that go along with this whole pandemic story, they're ambiguous at best. I read it was taking the mickey out of it, but really it just showed just how ridiculous it was. Remember they were saying, sneeze or cough into your elbow, and then they were saying don't shake hands but touch your elbow to the other person's elbow. It's stuff like that. Now, when we look at the silly things like that they were telling us, and then we look a little deeper to the stuff that they were really quite serious about, and we go, hang on a minute, no, that doesn't add up, right? That's what I encourage you to do. They are pushing a narrative to do with this vaccine, and they're pushing a narrative of fear in people. And fear is never... if you can read between the lines and see that they are driving a story with fear, ask yourself why. Remember I said in the previous video, if it's true enough, you only need to say it once or twice, get it across to people, and they will say, right, yeah, you're right. Yeah, exactly. Let's do that. But there are so many people that are hesitant with good reason, and they just keep pounding this story home. They just bang, bang, bang. Go get it. If you don't, you're going to die. I'm listening to the radio a lot on this job, and they have some callers calling up that really are refreshing, because they can see through the crap that keeps being pushed. And then the commentators, or the talk show hosts on the radio will respond. Unfortunately, not all of them are, but most of them are. They'll respond in such a way as, look, but you need to realize that if you don't go and get vaccinated, you will die of COVID. That was a direct quote, and I'm not going to use their name. Don't want to get myself into trouble, but that's what they said. Remember, if you don't go and get the vaccine, you will end up in hospital with COVID. You will die of COVID. Now, if we know the numbers of people that actually have, compared to the number of people that have actually had the virus, we know that that is just a it's completely disingenuous. We can't say that when we've got the numbers of people that are recovering from it, even including across all of the demographics and all of the age ranges. A survival rate of 99 point something percent, 99.5 or 99.7 or 99.6 or 99.3. The number's always about 99 point something. They're talking about it in that way. The survival rate is that. But you will end up in hospital and you will die of COVID. Very disingenuous. Very, very loaded language. Not, yeah. So, but anyway, I digress. I didn't want to go off on that tangent, but just really look at this stuff. But the fact that this construction was continuing on, the supply squeeze on timber and steel and other building products as well, I well imagine, but obviously steel and timber being the main frame material, they're the two that stand out a lot. The supply squeeze, and where did that even come from? The question that people keep asking, where did that come from? How is that possible? Well, it's possible because it is real, and it happened because while you were at home watching Netflix or watching your DVD, does anyone still watch DVDs at home? While everyone's watching their Fox Sports or their, people were still out there building these houses, building these apartments, building these storage buildings and whatever else that they were building. That stuff didn't stop. And that's where all the materials went. And that's why we have a supply issue. So, but of course, if everything they were telling us about this whole pandemic was true, that should not have happened. That should not have been continuing. Everything should have slowed right down, including construction. And it didn't. So we need to ask ourselves, why is that? Anyway, that's all I really wanted to share for this video. It's gone long enough. Thank you very much for your time. If you liked this video, please leave a like. I'd love to read in the comments what your thoughts are on this. Were you aware that this was occurring? And how do you feel now that you know that that's what was occurring, while you were told you couldn't do anything and you just had to hold your hand out and rely on government payments? I'd love to hear what you've got to say about that, if anything. If you want to share this video, that'd be great. I think people need to know this stuff and need to understand that what we're being told and what is actually going on are quite often two very different things. And until next time, thank you for joining me. God bless, and we'll see you in the next videos. Bye for now.